Okay, we're live. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to this live Q&A brought to you by iBiology in partnership with the National Research Mentoring Network, NRMN. Today, we're going to be discussing how to get the most out of a conference to help you advance your career. We have a really amazing panel of speakers today who will be sharing their experiences and insights. I want to remind you that you can submit your questions using the Q&A function on the Google Hangout. You can also send your tweets using the hashtag iBioHangout. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speakers today. First, we have Dr. Manu Plat. He is an associate professor in biomedical engineering and chair for graduate admission and recruiting at the Georgia Institute of Technology, Georgia Tech, and Emory University School of Medicine. His lab studies proteolytic mechanisms in a number of diseases, including pediatric strokes in children with sickle cell disease, HIV-mediated cardiovascular disease, tendinopathy and overuse injuries, and personalized medicine applications to predict individual patient-specific cancer metastasis potential. We also have Dr. Marisa Salazar. She's an assistant professor of organization and management at the Paul Mirage School of Business at the University of California, Irvine. And her research centers on the mechanisms that facilitate effective collaborative processes and outcomes in interdisciplinary teams. And last but not least, we have Dr. Anna Skop. She is an associate professor in genetics at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She is a geneticist and an artist who is nationally known for using art to inform her scientific work on the mechanisms of cell division, cytokinesis, to understand human diseases such as cancer and age-related disorders. And I am Dr. Monica Feliu Mojer. I am the Community Engagement and Outreach Manager for iBiology, and I am also Vice Director for Ciencia Puerto Rico. So thank you to our speakers for being with us today. So I want to start to kind of setting the stage. Conferences are a key part of science. We go to them to present our research, to hear other people's work, to kind of discuss our ideas with colleagues, network, and they're really important stepping stones in the career development of trainees and really of scientists in general. But conferences can be overwhelming, and so how do you make sure that you get the most out of them? You may be paying a lot of money, you're maybe taking a week out of your work to attend these conferences, and so how do you make sure that you really milk the opportunity of going to these conferences? And so that's going to be the focus of our conversation today. And I want to start by asking our panelists, how do you decide which conference is best to attend?
Okay, I'll jump in first here. Hi, everyone who's listening. So as Monica mentioned in my description, my work crosses a number of different fields, right? And so there's a number of opportunities for conferences that I might want to attend. So it's a really good question about thinking which ones will I choose to go to. And I think that also matters at what stage of career that one is. So when I was a grad student or postdoc, it was quite important, of course, to talk to my research advisor to figure out which one at that point was what's the best place to present my work to target the community that would be most receptive to it and that would be most impressed by what I was saying, since I was going to need to then leverage that for a next position or a new position after I left my PhD. So I would think students at that phase should actually consider that. Where would your work be most appreciated? You don't want to give a talk somewhere where you're the only one and they won't recognize the importance of it. But as you get further into your career, so when I became an assistant professor, it became very important to attend conferences that were specific to my discipline. So I became very active in the Biomedical Engineering Society. My field is biomedical engineering, which it's a broad discipline as a whole, but that's where every professor attends who will be the ones who will help advance my career, write letters for me for tenure, and really be leadership in my specific discipline. So it became very important to attend that meeting and and participate more than just giving a scientific talk. So nowadays, now in post tenure, when I decide where I would like to spend my time, I think about where would my students get the best exposure, and then also what conferences do I want to attend where I will learn something new if there's a new field that I'm entering, and I really want to hear what the experts are saying. So maybe that's less of me sharing my own work, but more of me listening to what's on the cutting edge of that field, and that's kind of how I make my decisions throughout my career.
Yeah, I'll take up another. I think Manu answered that pretty perfectly. I think the other thing that he didn't touch on was that you have to prioritize based on how much money you have, actually. And so in my lab, being small, we decide that we're going to maybe go to 2 conferences a year. One is more organism-based, so we go to a C. elegans conference that's sort of more general to learn techniques. And then our other conference, since I'm a cell biologist, we tend to choose something field-specific, which is cell biology, even though it's broad. But on some years, we go to smaller meetings where networking is more prevalent, like a Gordon conference, where I find that I can network and talk to more people in that smaller group. And so I tend to prioritize based on technical knowledge gains, and then our scientific knowledge gains are more broad in my field. But I do go to smaller ones that, like Manu said, there are sort of on the edge of your research or where your research may be going, so that you get some ideas, and those have been fruitful. And oftentimes they've been Gordon conferences or maybe an EMBO meeting. I just went to Ireland for an EMBO meeting, and that was sort of on the edge of my work, but similar, and I felt like I'm energized to go forward with my research because it was something new that I didn't normally attend.
Yeah, I think both of those answers were really solid. I would just echo the latter part about conference size. If you are a new person in your field, I think you can get a lot of exposure to all of the experts, the people whose work you've been reading. But at the point in which you really want to form deeper connections or maybe find a meaningful collaboration, then you either have to make those big conferences feel small by going with a plan already, maybe emailing someone to say, hey, can we meet for coffee, or trying to make sure you attend a certain social event, or if not, go to something small enough to where at a conference dinner or lunch you're actually able to have conversation about research. That's really important at all stages, I think, of one's career.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I'm actually going to use that last point that you made, Maritza, to talk about how do you plan your time at a conference. If you're going, thinking ahead, you mentioned emailing people ahead of time, and so that is going to depend on your goal and on the size of the conference. But how do you tackle the program of a conference ahead of time so that you can make sure that you're coming in prepared?
Well, since I'll go ahead and continue, I guess, a little bit. So I think the first thing is definitely to, if you're, again, a graduate student or a postdoc, I think it's wise to even hear your own faculty present work, because sometimes at your home institution, despite seeing everyone down the hall all the time, you don't actually get a chance to know what everybody does. So I think a little bit of that, a little bit of attending talks that are around your own research area, I think that's a good way to start. And then you can often introduce yourself to key speakers and people whose work you find is really aligned with yours. And then I think there's a risk, I think, to setting up a one-on-one meeting if there's no point or purpose or function, right? So maybe it's, if you, like, for example, as a Latina scholar, it might be that sometimes you're looking for someone else who matches your experience, and it might be that there's another Latina in your field that you want to say, hey, I would like to meet you because you're walking in a path where I feel a little bit lonely, and maybe our work doesn't match up, totally, but I want to meet you and have a mentor, right? It could be that it's that you want to set up a meeting to literally talk about a collaboration or share data or do something to that extent. But the risk I was talking about earlier would be to set up a meeting with somebody who's really prolific in your area without any point, right? I think you have to really be thinking about either saying, can I help you with your research, or can we work together on something? It can't just be to have a cup of tea, right? So, but I'll go ahead and stop there and let my colleagues add to the conversation.
So yeah, that's great. Please have a point. Um, one other thing I'd like to jump in on is it's interesting how we don't know our own colleagues' work. That is a very interesting point. But one thing I've seen with my own graduate students that I'm trying to defer them from is if a large number of students from my institution go to a conference, like again, one of our professional society meetings, and then they'll all follow each other around to the talks for all the other graduate students from that institution. That is a bad, bad, bad idea. And I try to stop them from doing that because mostly the grad students know what each other are doing because they're talking about it all the time. They're doing local presentations. So the point of going to a national or international meeting is to see other work that's not published that you can't experience at your home institution. So that's one thing I would caution students about. It's great to be supportive of certain people that you really want to support because they need a friendly face in the audience, but also then remember it's your time at the conference too, and make sure you make the connections you need to make. Now, I'm a big nerd, like probably the other three are, and as well as the audience. So I find a lot of different science interesting, and it's easy to get caught up in being busy and staying busy and being at every talk. But one thing I had to learn very early on was that science, I used to think you could be a scientist in a dark room and just do your stuff and be by yourself, but it is a people business. And a lot of the magic happens at the meet and greets and the networking, which is as Larissa just described about at the function or the networking function. So if you fall asleep or you get tired, you need to make sure if you need a nap before it's time to be up for the evening dinner, then you need to take that nap because the evening dinner is where I love that phrase, make a large conference feel small. Because if you're strategically placed at a table with someone who you wanted to talk to, but for some reason you were too scared to make an appointment, as she mentioned, or because you knew you didn't have anything major to talk about, but if someone is sitting there at your round dinner table with you, they're not going anywhere until they finish eating and finish the last of the wine. So that is a perfect opportunity for you to become a social being as well as a scientist with them. And I know a lot of students who spend a lot of time working on their talk, or I'm getting ready for my own presentation, I'm nervous, I'm practicing, who will miss much of the conference until their one moment in the sun, but you've actually lost a lot of opportunity to really meet some great new scientists and to start to establish your network or to continue establishing your network. Because the meet and greets and the dinners and meals, perfect place to meet scientists, even randomly that you realize, I've been reading your work and I didn't know you look like this. So make sure you stay out of your own head and be involved in the meeting as a communication skill.
Yeah, so I'll just reiterate a lot of that stuff. I'd have to say for a conference, food, and food is the number one place to meet people and network. And I'm a big foodie and have my food blog, so I understand this a lot. I have actually met tons of people, even at my poster, know that I have a food blog. They want to have dinner with me, and I've networked that way. And what I've done, seen my students do the same thing as Manu, they all go together at the same institution. So what I've done with my students is at least invite them to one night at the conference where they all come with other people in my field, my other professor friends, so that they get to meet them and network with them. And they really like that, and they see that we're crazy and fun and enjoyable. I think it's a really good experience. But I have to say is since grad school, I've never skipped the dinners or the bars. And I think some students younger do that because they feel a little nervous. That is the number one place where I've made connections, collaborations, where people have been influential in my life, in my career, and lifelong, friends. I think I've found through all these things. So I think students tend to stay in a small cohort of people they know, but it's a mistake. And make sure you go out, And something, and it's also good to get rid of your phone at the meeting so that you're not interacting with these people that you know, but you're talking. So, but food is number one thing. Go where the food is.
Absolutely.
I'd
Absolutely.
like to add one additional piece, if that's fine, which is if you are on the job market, I think sometimes we think our advisor's job is just to read your work and to give you some, edits for your whatever, your dissertation, whatever it might be. It is also their job, I think, to do their rounds with you. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, hey, there's our annual conference coming up. Can I really want to get a job at X place or Y place? And I know you're a colleague with so-and-so. Could you help me? Could we set up a time where you could introduce me and make a bridge for me to another position? And so you shouldn't underestimate, or you shouldn't be intimidated to ask your advisor for that favor, because they will likely go, oh, I didn't think of that. Sure, let me, they're so busy often, right? So make that request and see what happens.
And to piggyback again, when you're at that conference, I think it's also important. I love what she said. So I'm always trying to make sure that my students, at least at an opening reception or some other reception, hey, you all need to be here on time, and I'm going to introduce you to everyone that I know in the room, right? Especially if they're there for a reason. If I have an undergrad that's looking for graduate school, I have a grad student looking for a postdoc, because that's how it all works through these face-to-face connections. But another thing that you should always consider about how you just make yourself known at a meeting is it's a challenging thing to try to get over, but once you do it the first time, it's easy. You should stand up and ask a question after a scientific talk. And once you ask the question, make sure you stand up and say your name and your institution. And that way everyone will have heard your name and they will know what school you're from. And then you ask your question, right? Try to make it a good question, but if, sometimes we are unaware. But that right there just sets you up above the room, especially if you say, my name is Manu Platt, I'm a third-year graduate student finishing next year. Then it tells the room, wow, this grad student is inquisitive and is not scared to ask questions. And they will remember that later around the dinner time when people have been in that room with you and may come up to you. And it's a nice segue. So that's a great way that you can also look smart and also get your name out there without having to have an interpersonal connection if you're nervous about that.
Yeah, those are all fantastic points. I mean, food and drinks, they build community. That's how, we connect. We need to eat. We need to at least drink water. So, that's a great way to find people, to connect. But you have to be prepared, and I'm going to throw a shameless plug here. We recently published a talk exactly about networking. Some talking about the elevator pitch. What are some of the things that you need to be ready to answer when you're going to these conferences, to these events? You have to be prepared. So you've already touched upon networking, but I wanted to give you if there is anything else that you want to add about networking, how to be prepared to go and network at these conferences, because I think it's one of the most important things that you go and do at conferences.
I think the one thing too is just shadow, like your mentor. That's a great way that was sort of mentioned before. If you're not hanging around your mentor, you're going to miss a lot of interactions and big people. And I find students tend not to know to do that, or they think they're intruding. The other way is I tell students to email those faculty that they want to talk to and meet them at their poster, tell them exact poster time and day, and can you show up. And this also is for people looking for postdocs or jobs, is have the people at the universities that you want to be at come to your poster and invite them. And if they don't show up, that's fine, but maybe some of them do. So being prepared and proactive like that will bring people to you, and then you don't have to worry about it so much. But also meet them at their poster. So if it's someone you want to talk to, or it's their student's poster, go to that poster. And those PIs will probably be there, or people from the lab. And so that's another way to do it. So just be prepared and pointed and focused on exactly what you want to do prior to the meeting.
Right, those are really good points. And because most conferences, you'll have the schedule before you go, right? Weeks before you go. And so it is worth the time to either look online or to pull out whatever you can find to get an agenda of where you want to be and who you'd like to see. If there's someone very particular you'd like to see, and if they're big enough and they're giving a plenary or a keynote or something like that, you should be in the audience. And then you can plan a strategy for later when you actually run into them to ask a critical question from their talk or something that excited you from what they said, because that looks like you take more of an interest. It's always interesting when someone comes up to me and says, "Oh, I wanted to talk with you. I missed your talk earlier, but I still wanted to meet you." And it's like, well, that's cool, but if you really cared, you would have, made it to my talk, which that would have jogged their egos just a little bit. But I think the other important thing to remember, particularly when you're a junior scientist, is that the senior people you want to meet or the mid-level, they're all people, right? They are all people. We are all nerds. All of us have some level of social anxiety, and so we're just regular people like you are. And so they may be nervous to meet new people. So when you come up to them, you can open the door and they're interested in talking with you, particularly if you know something about their work. So what I've been at meetings where I call us, they're my science celebrities, people who I just go goo for when I see them because I'm like, oh my goodness, I love your work. And I'm nervous, I didn't, and I will respond like that in a way that's very real, but it's also, somebody say, hey, okay, calm down and let's talk about what you like, and it can open up the door to a conversation. And other people that I will go to with a very targeted, I'm going to ask this question very specifically when I approach this person because I don't know their personality. And if I know I'm going to see them, as she mentioned, at their poster or at one of their students' poster, I know I'm going to make that approach. And I'll plan that if spontaneous conversation may be a little bit more nerve-wracking for some of us. So, but I think, again, the big point, they are just people, and we understand that junior scientists and trainees are there to meet with us. And at the same time, we still have to meet with Nobel laureates and famous people, and we are still nervous to meet other people. So the circle continues. So just remember that.
So I would say that, go into this kind of a meeting prepared, and hopefully your advisors have prepared you such that when you're doing your review papers and you're preparing the upfront sections of your papers, you have been asking yourself, who is my community of scholars, who am I writing to, such that you have a couple of names and you know where those people are working and you know what their stream of research is about, so that when you by chance are sitting at the table and you see a name, you don't make the mistake of not knowing that that was the person you've been citing. And so you really do want to do a little bit of homework, especially if that you're new to the community, your scholarly community, of maybe Googling a little bit more, figuring out some individuals. That way when you do have your time in the sun there, that you're not going, oh gosh, who are they and what did they write again and what is their work about? Because that can really backfire, right? You can look underprepared and you weren't really interested in their work. And I think the other thing is that people don't want to spend every minute of their conference in the weeds talking about their academic. I would do a little bit, even if you're a person that does have a lot of high social anxiety. Get the New York Times, see what's happening popularly. That way, if the conversation does switch from shop, you do have something that you are able to show some chit-chat skills. Because at the end of the day, especially if you're on the market, people are looking to say, could I handle this person at a faculty meeting, right? Are they also social and are they also easy to chat with, whether it's sports or food or whatever your thing might be? Maybe have one or two topics for a random chatter that you do have in your back pocket for those awkward silences, right? But anyhow, in terms of generally preparing, right, I would look a little bit into people's vitas and kind of get a map of where you are and, make sure you're at the right talks. I would go ahead and ask your advisor, is there anybody who you would like me to talk to? Is there a particular technique or something, can I help you get the most out of your conference? Because you never know, right? Because sometimes it's easier for a student to go meet a faculty to say, hey, we've been working with such and such a technique in our lab, and I'm really thinking I can do X or Y with it. I work with Dr. So-and-so. Can we spend some time, or can I meet with one of your grad students? But always try, if you can, to help the lab in whatever way you can, too, I think.
just to jump in again, this is great. And just thinking about conference etiquette, if you are presenting at a session and say there are 6 speakers at the session, everyone giving a 15 to 20-minute talk, proper conference etiquette is you should stay for your entire session, right? So you shouldn't leave. If you're the first talk, don't give your talk and leave and go to attend other sessions. That's improper etiquette. People will notice and it will be taken, or it can be taken offensively. So just as a warning to everyone out there. And then just to jump on what Maurice was saying about your homework, a lot of times when it's Google, you can get pictures of people. And some of them are older pictures, but you can still have a glance. And so even I know some people who will print out pictures and put the name of that person underneath it so that they will then keep their eye out to know what a person looks like when they come up on them at a conference. So that's just another little tip so you can make it a natural, I happen to sit at your table, but I did know who you were from across the room, right?
Some mild stalking. That's great. No, that's a great piece of it. I actually do that, especially if there are people that I want to connect with. I'll Google them because I want to know what they're doing and I want to know more about them, but also to just see their faces. And if I recognize them in a crowd, I know I have a purpose and I know where to go. I know where to sit. So yeah, that's a really good piece of advice. Just to kind of wrap up the networking topic, and probably will come up.
Can I just add a little, sorry,
Yeah.
really quickly.
Yeah, go
so
for
I
it.
am a mother of 2 children, right? And in the last 3 years, I was nursing, or there was other parts of preparing for a conference that might be important for women going to the conference, right? And so it sounds so silly, but things like making sure if you're staying at a hotel that you get the right refrigerators, or that there are places to either pump, or if you can bring a parent with you to a conference so that so you can work and do your conferencing and know that your kids are fine up in the hotel room with grandpa and grandma or abuelo, abuela, whatever it might be for you, right? But it's another thing when you're away for a week preparing to get ready for a conference when you have a family. And so just building that into so you can really enjoy it and get the most out of it and not pay so much of a tax because your mom or dad or whatever it might be.
Yeah, that's a really, really, really great point. Yes, absolutely. And I think there's some conferences that are kind of picking up on this, and then making sure that I've seen conferences where they have daycare, or where they have nursing rooms to support, to make sure that they can support mothers that are attending the conferences, because I can definitely see how a conference can be much more stressful and taxing, especially if you're a new mother. So that's a really great point, Maritza. I wanted to quickly ask, we have a question about what is the wrong way to network. You've already mentioned a few things. So if each of you can say like one no that you think people should stay away from.
Don't skip out on the meeting and go to your hotel room and sleep. Stay at your poster all day, right? So I've seen students, they stay at their poster only at the time that is required, and then they skip off. And I find that if I go earlier than the poster session, I always capture people, and if I stay, I get even more. And I have made more connections by utilizing that. And if you only have one day to present, try to maximize that time. And I felt like students usually skip off because they have an hour time at their poster. Even if no one's coming, try to pull people in, be engaged. I think some students sit and look at their phone today, and then never look out and try to pull people in, because no one wants to talk to someone who's looking at their phone. And that is more common today than ever before. My students, I'm like, there's all these people, pull them in, tell them what you have to say, So I think that's the biggest mistake, is put your phone down and stand there and interact with people. So.
Yeah, those are great. One thing that this may be controversial, but this is what I end up having to tell, particularly African American students, and this may be true for Latinas as well, is, you were raised where your parents told you don't drink at a work function. And so there's so many that I see who don't have alcohol. They're walking around with water or Sprite or water, and it's at the bar, the open bar. There's an open bar at the conference, and everyone else has a little lubricant that just makes them more open, and they're talking and freely. And particularly when I talk to some of these African American men and women, they're nervous. They're extremely nervous. They're one of two in the room, so they're extremely nervous, and they're drinking this water because their parents said, don't drink at a work function because you might act crazy. So I like to debunk that myth because if one will get you loose, that you are more open, then have the one or sip the one for the entire evening. Now, as you get older, you get more control over yourself. I mean, because as Anna mentioned, this is where all the magic is really happening, right? And so you don't have to close the bar down, but if you do, there are so many senior important professors who will close the bar down. And when you whittle away everyone else and you are one of the few there still talking with that person, the insight you could garner about even just professional development, career trajectories, it's way more than what you would get at a talk, at a science talk. So if someone just doesn't drink because it's against their religion or that's, just their way of life, then what I always suggest is get a glass of red wine and just walk around with it. Don't sip it, just walk around with it. Because as someone who drinks, I know this is being recorded, it is offensive if you come to me with a glass of water and you're looking at me like you're going to get another one. That's offensive. So just have your one glass of red wine and just walk around with it, and it looks like you're one of the crew. So whatever you were feeling like an outsider because of skin color or gender or whatever, at least you have a glass of wine like everyone else in the room, and it can open up the conversation for people to even approach you. So that's my personal tip that I like to tell students when I see them standing off to the side and scared. So we can discuss if you'd like.
Manu, I thought you were going to take it the whole other direction because I have also seen the other end of that, kind of the curvilinear relationship where people, it's just like, hey, yes, I know the alcohol is free, but look, we're still at work, And so you also have to be a little bit mindful of knowing your number, right? And sticking to it, because if you're not able and you make it to the end of the night and you're slurring your sentences, then that's not going to cut it either, right? So it's like, be social, but hey, recognize that you're still at work to some degree, right?
Right, and what becomes important there too. Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
go for it. And what becomes important there that a senior colleague told me
No.
is that you stand out in that room, right? So that's the other thing you have to remember. If you're the only Latina, you're the only African American, whatever, you will stand out. So that's another important point. Know your number, or everyone will notice you acting crazy. Good point.
So I think some networking mistakes that I would say, I really think that first impressions are huge, and I think that there are some standard things, right? And if you have not gotten, if you're the first academic in your family, for example, and you're figuring out professional clothing and whatnot, make sure that you look, sharp. And that doesn't always mean the black plain suit. Maybe wear something that, makes you stand out, makes you feel a little bit more confident. But in the question of a networking mistake, I do think a skirt that's too short, a blouse that's too low cut, a blazer that's a little too snug, I don't think that that's the kind of, especially if you are Latina, Black, Native women, I think there's a tendency to kind of be overly sexualized in professional context because people will find you, for whatever, you're the, whatever, I'm not going to go there on the call, right? But recognizing that you do have to dress a little bit more intentionally in order to set a message that says I'm here to be a serious academic. And I think related to the question of a networking mistake, right, I would say that the other thing is being a little overly aggressive about opportunities or job, whether it's, explicitly saying something like, so are you hiring now, and what are you guys looking for? And if somebody is interested in your work, they're going to send a signal. They're going to say to you, oh, send me your vita or send me that paper you're working on. But you don't want them running from you because you're, really putting the pressure on about a job or about something. So just know where the line is, and when you're being invited to share more work, share more data, whatever it might be, so that people want, if they see you again the next day or 2 days later, that they'll be interested again in chatting and not running around you because they're afraid you're going to be badgering them for something. So those are my two kind of comments, and yeah.
Yeah, and to go off of that, I think it's really important for us to be aware of the context of the conference. There's going to be some spaces in which you can maybe, if you want to have a drink, you can, and there's some spaces maybe you're not going to be comfortable doing that. So it's important to know your strengths, to know your limits, to understand the context. And I absolutely agree with you. I've been to conferences, particularly conferences that are focused on bringing students from underrepresented backgrounds, where there is, there has to be a balance. And I have seen for sure the too short skirts, and they look like, sometimes the students look like they're gonna go to a club, and that's not the right that's not the right space. But I think it's also important to be yourself. There has to be a balance with expressing your culture, your pride, and your identity, and who you are. And if you want to wear, a colorful top, or maybe a statement necklace, you don't have to shy away from your culture and your identity, but it is very important that you have an understanding of the context and the goal of you being at the conference, because it can really affect you. So yeah, that's an incredibly valuable point, and it's one that I think it's very hard to bring up with students, or I find it hard to bring up with students I mentor. So I really appreciate that.
Can
All
I
right.
add one more piece to
Yeah.
this? I'm
Yes,
sorry.
go for it.
Just
No, go for
so
it.
because my screen is small, so I'm actually a tall black man, right? And so I love what you're saying about kind of watching the cues and being too aggressive and just watching the people cues, because what just full disclosure is what happens sometimes for me. I'm 6'3", and so sometimes when I approach people at meetings, I see them backing away, right? And there's a certain level of fear, right? So I think if you are able to understand people, and we all know what stereotypes exist out in the United States, whether they're fair or not, just how then to approach a stranger in a way, knowing whatever they may think about you initially seeing, which is why I love Maurice's comments about how one should be dressed. So when it's networking time, just I'm dressed for business, right? It's business, business casual, because there's so many times when I get mistaken for not being the PI or not being a scientist or being, and I would say, just if you're an African American male, don't wear the black suit, because if it's at the reception, someone might ask you for water or for something else, right? So that's why I appreciate wearing a colorful or a different tone or a different color shirt, so that you know that I'm not the help, but also it allows you to look at me as a happy, nice person. So when I approach you to speak, I'm not here for any other reason but for science. And so I think for any, culture, gender identity, I think, like, you're right, express yours, but also be aware you need to have a professional baseline, and then be aware of when you approach people how they might perceive you, so that you can overcome those hurdles.
Mhm.
That's good.
That's right. But, I want to just really underline, I bet you Manu would say this, the most important point is what Anna said. If you sit out the conference because of your own insecurities, your fears, your sense of I don't belong here, I'm the only one that looks like me, I'm the only one asking this kind of a question, you are literally deciding to sit out of the academic conversation. You're missing out on talking to a funder who might see you as doing exactly what it is they want you to do. So participate first, and then all the other things we would say are probably secondary, because you have to get in there to be in the game. So.
Awesome. So I want to switch gears a little bit now. We have a question coming from Maria Agapito from St. Peter's University. And so her question is, as an undergraduate and even a high school student interested in research, what is the best advice to find more about graduate school? And I think more broadly, what is the best way to, if you're at a conference, how do you find out about opportunities for, grad school, or maybe a scholarship or a fellowship, and so on?
Well, you could definitely do research. That's one thing. Get a research opportunity in the laboratory, or find a professor you could shadow for a while. Summer research programs, a lot of different things. If you're interested in medical school, what do people usually do? They volunteer. Same thing in the sciences. So you're interested, in being in business. What do you see? People shadow people in businesses, or in biotech, and so you got to stick your neck out. Otherwise, you're not going to get those opportunities. So the best way is to ask your mentors, ask your teachers, ask anyone, what opportunities can I do to let me understand what scientific research is about, or what medical research is about, or what biotech industry is about, and do those things, or apply for summer programs. There's lots of free programs all over the country or the world you can go for free. I have an undergrad that has gone to China, Guatemala, USDA. He's all done those for free, and he's trying to figure out where he wants to be by doing those experiences, in addition to being in my laboratory. And I allowed him to do those things. But all you have to do is apply, and more often than not, you're going to get those. You keep applying, you'll get those opportunities for free, and you'll figure out whether you're going to like those fields.
And so if you're at a conference, where is the best way to find out about these opportunities? Do you go to the exhibit hall, or do you talk to people? How do you approach that at a conference?
Yeah, I mean, those things depends on the conference. So some conferences, it's all in the exhibit hall. Other things could be in small little workshops that you might find, certain schools asking for summer programs, or it's at a booth near the posters. So it depends on the focus of that conference. More often than not, you'll find that those professional development events someplace at the meeting, or on the website too, as well, of the meeting.
Right. I mean, I agree that if these are the opportunities you're looking for, at some of the larger conferences, that's where you will have the school, the colleges, universities you're interested in running large exhibitor booths. And so at some of the professional society conferences, I know at National Society of Black Engineers and also Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, schools go there to recruit students for graduate work or for even undergraduates. And at a lot of those booths, some places even have where you can sign up and get a fee-waived application. So I do enjoy taking senior undergraduates to some of these large meetings, because that's a great way for them to ask questions of the representatives of the different universities to which they may be applying, but also to get an application fee waiver that can save them some money on the grad school application. So I would think look for a larger meeting that would have all of that information, as opposed to one of the more smaller ones focused specifically on science that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. So SOCNAS and ABRCAMS are a great place to go, at least for biomedical, or other sciences. For SOCNAS is all-encompassing of all sciences. So those are two places, if you're really interested in graduate school, that's a place to go, versus a very specific science meeting.
Yeah, I just would probably, in some ways, I think I've always thought of the word networking and volunteering for the early part of my career as largely the same thing, right? And that if let's say that you happen to be working with someone who's got a large grant and they're going to do a kickoff of a project with a company or a lab or some people that they're partnering with, or they're going to go to volunteer and say, look, I know we're going to host this small meeting with scientists. Can I help you to manage travel? Or can I, if it's your new conference, write the organizers and say, can I help is there some way I can help to organize the conference so that I can get to know more about what's happening? And I just think that those kinds of touch points can help you to get into the club a little bit sooner, a little bit faster. So, but kind of to Anna's first point, right, I think recognizing that for a very long time as an undergraduate student and even an early graduate student, you won't get to ask your research question for a while. You'll really be saying, can I work with you to learn X technique or to learn about the field in general? When you're going to a conference, you're really going to listen and to find what resonates with you, and maybe just being really patient with that search process, that you're getting a lot of experiences that in the end will help you to have insight about what research question or what research path you want to be on in your career. But as much as you can say, how can I help you clean that data that's not really fun cleaning, but I might get access to what this career looks like, do it, because you just never know what what door that might open for you next.
Wonderful. Let's see what other questions we have. So we have a question about how to divide your time at a conference. You know, we talked a whole lot about the importance of making sure you go to the networking and the social functions, but when it comes to going to talks or posters, like how do you decide how to spend your time? Do you go to all talks and no posters, or 50-50? You know, how do you make that decision?
I'll take that. So I tend to get more connections at posters than at talks. I go to the talks I want to go to, but I spend the bulk of my time at posters. I tend to run into people as I'm walking from poster to poster. And I actually prefer myself to give a poster for my lab because I tend to find people and network with people and students that might be interested in my work. I hang out at my students' posters all the time. I enjoy posters immensely. I think they're very, very important, especially when not all people get talks. I really think that they're sort of the hallmark of a meeting. It's an honor to give a talk, but oftentimes you just don't get the networking that you normally would, depending on the size of the meeting. So I tend to spend my time at posters.
I just love the visual of like Anna just holding court, like having a party at all of her posters. I just love that. But that is the goal of a good poster. I mean, that is where you have a crowd around and everything. That's amazing. I love it. Sorry. Um, I think it also, beyond the science part of it, I think it's also about if you're an introvert or an extrovert that you have to think about. So if you're an extrovert doing a poster and all this one-on-one activity and lots of personal interactions can be like motivating, energizing, and everything you need. And I do agree with her that there's a lot more interaction and a lot more good questions and methodologies and a lot of that more connection that happens at a poster because there's only 3 minutes left for questions. For me, sometimes though, so I'm an introvert by nature, but people think I'm an extrovert. So I can do the poster for a long time, and after so much, I'm just worn out. And then I like to go and hide in a session of all talks of something I may be interested in to kind of revive my energy while I'm still getting hit with some good science. And then I'm ready to go back to the posters if there's more that I need to see. So and again, I love the whole thing about planning your conference, which will change because there are times when I'm like, I need to be at these poster sessions, I need to be there. So let me make sure I sit in some talks that morning because if I do the morning posters and the afternoon posters, I'm going to be really fatigued and tired because for me, that interaction, though I love it, it does drain my energy, it makes me quite fatigued. So again, I like to be strategic with how I think about my time to not only get the signs that I want, but also so physically and mentally I'm able to manage it. And that comes with the more conferences you go to, you'll kind of learn yourself and how you tire during the day. But definitely, again, to Maritza's point, stay out there at one or the other during the whole day. Okay.
And
Yeah,
I just wanted just a few seconds. Strangely, I think of myself as an introvert as well, but that's for a topic of another discussion.
But generally, though, I think the common thread here is to watch your energy and watch what energizes you and watch what takes your energy away. Because when you do encounter someone, you want to be your best self, right? Energy, showing the enthusiasm you have for your work, the field, etc. To just knowing, you know what, I got to get out of this hotel room. I got to go for a little walk. I need to go, make a phone call to whoever, my significant other, mom, dad, whoever, regroup, and then get back out there, right? I think that's a really important part of the day because it is really stressful because you're constantly going, it's hard not to compare relatively, who is coming to my work, who's not, where am I in the totem pole of who's in, there is a lot happening psychologically at a conference, right? So you got to protect yourself. But I would say the other thing that fits a lot on my schedule is meeting collaborators because I think you go to these conferences and sometimes all your collaborators are there too, and so sometimes you're actually working, right? You're setting up some time to talk about the work you're kicking off or data you've gotten in, and so often I prioritize that my own talks of my students, those collaborative meetings, and then for me posters are really something for like an afternoon pre-rest and dinner, something like that. But meeting time and one-on-one time is a priority for me in planning.
Yeah, I love that last piece of advice. I do get networked out. There is a time when I'm like, I can't think straight, and literally if you're talking to me, I could be looking at you blanking and I'm like, what? So, it's important to know yourself and to pace yourself, know what works and what doesn't work for you so that you can really get the most out of the experience. So I want to go to a question we have.
But you know what? Right now, Monica. Oh,
go for it. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, really quick, Monica. Just your comment right now reminded me of what I would add to my top 3 of networking mistakes, which is talking to somebody while looking to see who else is in the room and who else you could be talking to, because that, people really deserve. Everyone is really special, right? Be them a young student who might be the next Nobel laureate, or a senior person that's having a kind of a lull in their publishing, but for whatever reason they need to connect with you at this meeting for something. Just be present for like the 5-10 minutes and then excuse yourself, but just don't look past people like they're not important, because you just never know when they might, I don't know, I just pay attention to whoever you're with. I don't know if Manu and Ana, Monica, if you've ever experienced that, but it's,
Cosine.
Something that happens a lot.
Cosine.
Yeah.
I think for me, I wave at everyone when I go by, and if I know they're talking to a student, I just punch them in the arm, and to know that I've seen them, or I pinch them or something, I walk by. I'm just funny like that, but I don't like to disturb the conversation, but at least acknowledge it. Other times I introduce myself to the student, so I make it a networking part of it, but I make it sort of jokingly funny, and I say, okay, fine, I'm going, I'll see you later. But I think that happens quite a bit, where you see people, hey, I see you, and you're talking to someone, and it can be rude, and I could say I probably do it myself. But I always try to keep it minimal when I'm walking by, understanding that networking event is really important to that student.
And and that also, the segue on that, how that plays a part when you are presenting a poster. If you're in the midst and talking to one person, you should keep your eye out for when others come around, because you don't want to have your back to someone else that's looking. Like, again, body language would be to kind of open it up, not ignore the person you're talking with who clearly is interested, and that's great, but to kind of open up your language so the other one can be included if they need to be, because that also plays a part in, or else they might walk off and be like, well, I don't care. But, I mean, her point about being rude and when you see someone else running away, because you never know who's going to review your application for the next thing or review your paper. You just never know. This field is so interconnected. Good point.
Yeah, I mean, and if you see someone else, you can punch them in the arm and be like, hey, let me introduce you to this person. And if there's an opportunity to bring them into the conversation, you can do that. But it goes back to also something that Ana said earlier. Don't be looking, if you're networking, don't be looking at your phone. Maybe if there's an emergency and somebody's texting you, you can say, excuse me, I need to reply to this, but be present. That's connecting. It's networking is about meaningful connections, and if you're not present, you can't make that meaningful connection. So that's really important. We have a few minutes left, so I want to you to answer a question that we have about networking, specifically if you're looking to get an interview for a postdoc. What are some things that you should do, maybe that's very specific to that context?
I'd say give a good poster. If you're looking for a postdoc, have papers. Make your poster pretty flashy and reel people in. Be energetic, but make appointments with the faculty members are interested, to have them invite them to the poster. Tell them you're interested in coming to their lab. Have them, here's my poster, here's the date. I'm interested, but that happens before the meeting. And then at the meeting, you got to do your best job. Communicate your science as best as you can visually, and then orally, to the PI, and you're going to make a big impression.
Yeah, and to co-sign that, I would say it also gets to the point of being bullying or overbearing when you meet someone. A nice way you can let it be known that you're looking for postdocs, if you run into someone that you've not made an appointment with or emailed in advance, is it's great to say, I will be finishing my PhD in such and such month, and I'm beginning to look at postdocs, and that tells the person who you're talking to, guess what, I'm looking for postdocs, and I think as Anna maybe said earlier, if that is an opening for them to open up that they are looking for postdocs, not that they're offering you a position, but just, oh, I'm looking for one, we should stay in touch. But there's a way, but if they don't offer that or that opening is not there, you have to kind of play it carefully. If you're like, so can I work for you? Like, because then it gets to be in a front, and then they're going to back away from you. So, but there are ways that you can provide very open clues that I'm finishing soon, I'm looking for postdocs. And if they've been at your poster for a really long time and they care about some technique or some finding that you have, then it's great to, especially if you know their work, and well, I think the system could apply for you when your studies of X, Y, and Z, and they're like, you know what, oh my goodness, it could, and then it can lead organically to these conversations. But I would say the people that you want to meet, I love this idea about making the appointments, and others have done that. And then also when you talk with them, think about how your work merges with theirs. Don't just let them have all the ideas, because that's what we look for in good postdocs. What will you bring to me, as well as what will you learn from me?
I would also be very intentional about your words and what you share. So people, if you're going to be talking about they say, oh, how was your doctoral experience, or what have you learned? And you start maybe criticizing your current advisor as you're trying to communicate what it is you're looking for, and a future postdoc advisor, I'm probably not super professional. I would also, many people in this stage of your career, you might be dating someone seriously, or all these other things might be part of your search. I would let the door open, get an invitation, get a fly out to go, before you start saying, oh, but, we don't really want to commute in our relationship, or, oh, just leave all your constraints, your personal ones, leave those for later, after you're in maybe negotiating or having to make a decision, because you can close a lot of doors when you start to give all of your contingencies too soon.
Great piece of advice. And then a follow-up question that I actually wanted to bring up before we wrap up is, you've gone to the conference, you saw all this great research, you made all these great connections, found all these amazing opportunities. What do you do to follow up after the conference so that you keep the conversation going and that you actually, you have actionable items after the conference?
I am the worst at this. I will admit. I am the worst at this because I hate email as an entity. But you do need to send the follow-up emails. And really, what I tell young people, make sure the subject line of that email will catch the eye. So I like to put Manu from X conference from dinner, right? My name stands out, but it's because you have to realize the people that you may be trying to contact are getting 200 to 300 emails per day. And particularly when they leave a conference, there's probably a backlog of emails because they're ignoring them to be out and with the people. So I would say email at least within that week, and I would say never be self-confident about emailing again and again. As long as you're not rude and pushing the email, I always tell people, keep emailing me until I respond, because I skip a lot of emails, and I don't take it offensively. It's just the nature of the beast. But what I would caution there is, don't say, I emailed you 2 weeks ago after we left that conference, and I haven't heard from you, so I'm emailing you again. I don't care when you emailed me before. Make each email a fresh new email with the same level of enthusiasm, and I am more eager to respond. I feel bad I've been ignoring this wonderful person for this long. I need to respond. So if you keep a good attitude, I'm going to get around, I'm going to reply. But the earlier you do it and the often, and maybe send them one of your papers, right? If you met someone you're interested in a postdoc, send your paper that's out that you want them to be reminded of the work that you presented. Some people even send PDFs of the posters they presented if their advisors are okay with it, but something else that keeps you in mind. And I would definitely say if you're contacting someone about a future employment, always send a CV. Without a CV, I mean, I have nothing really to judge you on, so always send that.
Good advice.
Yeah, I don't really have anything else to add besides follow up via email, follow up in a timely
Cosign.
way. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we all cosign. Something that I like to throw out there is, if the person is open to it, another way to follow up is social media. I'm a huge Twitter user, and I'm faster to respond if people send me a tweet and say, "Oh, I saw your talk. I'd love to connect with you." Like, I'm actually faster doing that than an email, because you're exactly right, Manu. Like, if I'm at a conference, I have a backlog of emails because I'm not at my computer all the time, so it takes me a little bit to catch up. So I think that is less common, that people are very active on social media, but that is something else that you can consider as a follow-up, for sure.
I actually I feel honored when I got a tweet from a student who was excited to be next to my poster, at the meeting, and so that was sort
That's
of
great.
an icebreaker, and so I just introduced myself. But I have actually found the power of Twitter to be unbelievable at science conferences, because there is a cohort of people I have never even met in person, but I follow them on Twitter, and I meet them, Monica being one of them. And then eventually I met her. And so that has been very powerful for me professionally, with my expanding my network or going outside my network and making new networks. And so, yeah, Twitter has got a lot of power, and I really like it. And I often feel very honored for students to contact me that way, because not a lot of them are using it. Right? And so I like it. I find a lot of good papers for my own teaching on Twitter. So I encourage more people to use it.
Yeah, I co-sign on that for sure. So unfortunately, we've run out of time. But I've been taking notes on kind of some of the things and the big takeaways. One of them, if you want to get the most out of a conference, you have to plan, you have to be prepared. You have to be present. It's really important that you're present. It's also very important that you know your strengths, that you know yourself, and that you don't shy away from being yourself. It's also very important to look for spontaneous conversations. You may meet your next advisor or mentor in the elevator, or having dinner. So be open to those spontaneous conversations. Getting the most out of a conference it's not just about hearing a talk or doing a poster. You have to be aware of your context and your audience and who is around you, and just make the most out of it. I don't know if you guys have any final quick thoughts about the conversation.
I have one last thought, which is when we, the sociology of science, right? When we look at where does innovation come from, really creative ideas, and it usually comes from the fringes, right? A new person in the field, somebody who's from another field, using a technique from another discipline. And so with that, I would say if you only pay attention to the big names, the senior people, they're going to be largely in their routine on a trajectory of research that is like what they've been doing the last couple of years. So mix it up a little bit, right? Go to a couple of people who are assistant professors or just getting started, because they're likely, even though they don't have the fame and the credibility yet, innovation might be there. At the same time, be wary. Not every student has yet the chops to be doing quality work. So know, and hopefully your teachers are teaching you to discern quality from not quality, novel from ridiculous, right? But all I'm saying is don't just pay attention to the names that everybody's following. Be open to mixing up the portfolio of things you attend to get some new ideas, fresh perspective.
Right. And even in the disciplinary work, like don't just go to talks that are just in your area of research. Take some time to explore things that are outside of that because you never know what that integration magic could bring to your own studies. And my final thought would also be enjoy it, right? If you're there, it's probably there was free travel, free hotel, and shout out to Anna, free food. So make sure you spend time and enjoy being away, right? It's a bit of a vacation, but it's a work vacation. And I love the free travel and all the free food. So make sure you take time to enjoy. And you're with your people. This is your tribe of nerds. So enjoy that.
Yep. Have fun and get excited about science. That's what I love. Meetings energize me immensely. There's nothing I love more than meetings, and I think as a PI, I love them even more because I get to see people I've met at meetings, right?
Yeah.
So it just gets better and better. It's like a family. That's what I love. It seems big when you start out, and it gets smaller as you end up, as big as it may seem. And I find that I've know more people than I ever met, and these people change my life, and they make me think differently. That's what I love.
Awesome. Well, on that note, thank you again, Anna, Manu, and Maritza for being here, for all the real talk and all the advice that you shared. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This is being recorded, so it's going to be available on YouTube, on the iBiology website, and also on the NRMN website soon. So keep an eye out for that, and we will see you next time. Thank you.